Join our community by subscribing. Every click helps us share more stories like this one.
The introduction. Just after dawn, the world seemed to hold its breath. A thin veil of fog curled around the ancient trees of Maplewood Park, enveloping the ground in a ghostly shroud. It was early October, and the crisp air carried the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves. As the first rays of sunlight broke through the canopy, they revealed a landscape transformed by the changing seas. However, beneath the serene beauty lay an undercurrent of tension that would soon unravel one of Maplewood's darkest secrets. This town, with its picturesque streets, lined with its Victorian homes, had always prided itself on its tight-knit community. People knew each other by name, greeted one another on their morning jogs, and gathered every Saturday at the local farmers' market. It was this simplicity that belied the tragedy that was about to unfold. In the soft light of that morning, the sound of police sirens echoed through the park, a grim reminder that the idyllic appearance of Maplewood was about to be irrevocably shattered. Detective Sarah Monroe stood at the edge of the crime scene, her breath visible in the cold air as she surveyed the area. 24 hours earlier, nobody could have predicted that a jogger would stumble upon a lifeless body nestled beneath a cluster of oak trees. Now the park was a bustle of activity, with forensic teams collecting evidence and officers cordoning off the area. Sarah's chest tightened as she took in the sight before her. This was no ordinary case, and she knew it would take all her skills to unravel the threads of this mystery lurking within the shadows of Maplewood. As the sun climbed higher, casting long shadows from the trees, a sense of urgency surged through the air. Who was this victim, and what secrets would they uncover in the days to come? The victim. Maggie Foster was known around Maplewood as the spirited owner of the Cozy Nook, a charming bookstore that smelled of aging paper and fresh coffee. Her laughter echoed off the walls, inviting both locals and visitors to lose themselves in tales of adventure and romance. For 2 decades she had poured her heart into that little shop, creating a sanctuary for those seeking refuge from the chaos of everyday life. Yet that same spirit that breathed life into the store now lay lifeless, draped in a stark white sheet on the cold, dew-kissed grass of Maplewood Park. Detective Monroe examined the scene with a heavy heart. Maggie was only 43, full of dreams yet to be realized, her passion illuminating the lives of so many. The coroner's preliminary assessment indicated that she had died approximately 12 hours before her body was discovered. The circumstances surrounding her death, murky at best. There were no immediate signs of struggle or foul play, but the dark reality was that Maggie lived alone, shielded by her artful charm, but also vulnerable to the hidden dangers that lurked within the community. Through the cacophony of the distant voices and the rustling of leaves, Monroe's brow furrowed as she recalled her last encounter with Maggie. A mere week prior, Maggie had confided her worries about the declining foot traffic in the shop, the rise of online sales threatening the livelihood of boutique bookstores like hers. Perhaps these fears had driven her to confide in someone she shouldn't have. Or maybe a restless spirit had sought her out in the quiet of the night. The detective knelt beside the body, studying the victim's handmade bracelet, a delicate piece woven with colorful threads, reminiscent of Maddie's vibrant personality. It appeared untouched. Nothing had been taken, offering no immediate motive. Monroe knew then that the investigation would demand patience and persistence. For the heart of this case hinged not only on uncovering what had taken Maggie's life, but also on understanding The layers of love, desperation, the surface of this quaint town. The crime scene. The sun climbed overhead, casting stark shadows across the park as Detective Monroe surveyed the crime scene. Yellow tape flapped in the breeze, an emblematic barrier between the idyllic morning and the reality of a night tainted by violence. She moved cautiously, mindful of each step, focusing on the details that might reveal more than just a body. They might narrate a story that had yet to be uncovered. Forensic teams examined the surrounding area, their movements precise and deliberate. As Monroe approached, she noted the jagged line where natural foliage met disturbed earth, where Maggie's body had been hastily concealed. Evidence markers were strewn about like small flags, fluttering in an invisible wind, each one signifying a potential clue. A broken twig, a cigarette butt, a piece of fat. The sense of dread mingled with the fresh scent of autumn. A reminder that darkness can exist even in the most beautiful places. One forensic technician held up a small item, a gold locket, partially open. It dangled from their tweezers as they turned it into the sunlight. Inside, a faded photograph of a young girl smiled back at them. Monroe felt a chill dance across her skin. A family, a lost childhood? She knew it would be critical to identify the locket's owner, a simple yet poignant connection that could lead her closer to the truth. Stepping back, Monroe scanned the immediate vicinity for any surveillance cameras that might have captured unseen movements. To her left, the trail meandered off into deeper woods, a popular route for joggers but now ominously silent. Beside her, two officers discussed the previous night's activity in the park, trying to piece together a timeline. After they reported little more than the usual late-night rustle of leaves and distant dogs barking, Monroe's gut tightened with unease. It seemed far too quiet for a place so frequently abuzz with life. A thought penetrated her focus. If the park was indeed a safe haven for the residents, then who could have harbored deep enough resentment to harm its beloved bookstore owner? The crime scene held whispers of answers, and Monroe was determined to listen to them all. The fog that enveloped Maplewood had begun to lift, revealing a chilling clarity. It was just the beginning of a complex puzzle, and she was resolute. She would not rest until every piece fell into place. The early investigation. That evening, under the dull glow of fluorescent lights at the Maplewood Police Department, Detective Sarah Monroe sat hunched over a cluttered desk. File folders lay scattered across the surface, a chaotic representation of their rapidly growing case. She flipped through witness statements and background checks on Maggie Foster, seeking a significant thread to pull. Each line told a story, but none manifested a clear motive or possible suspects. The small-town charm of Maplewood often masked the intricacies of its quieter lives, and Monroe had grown to appreciate the deep connections that shaped a community. Clenching her jaw, she remembered how Maggie's warmth seemed to have built a fortress of friendships around her. However, that same affection could also breed envy, or worse, betrayal. As night settled in, the phone on her desk rang sharply, breaking the monotony. It was Officer Max Chen, one of the first responders on the scene. Detective Monroe, I found something you might want to see. His voice was steady, but laced with tension. Minutes later, Monroe met Chen in the evidence room. He produced a small bag containing a red scarf, pulled from the trail leading away from the park. We found it snagged on a branch, a few yards away from where Maggie was found. It doesn't look like it belongs to her. The vibrant fabric contrasted starkly with the somber atmosphere, suggesting it might have been left behind in a rush. Monroe lifted the scarf, noting the texture and the faint scent of cologne lingering within the fibers. Her intuition screamed for further analysis. This could be a pivotal piece of evidence, a connection to someone who had crossed paths with Maggie that fateful night. Run it for DNA, and check any missing persons in the area who might match, she instructed Chen, her voice firm. Let's get to the bottom of this before we lose our trail. As he moved to leave, Monroe's gaze wandered back to the locket still on her desk. The photograph inside tugged at her conscience. It was a connection, a fragment of Maggie's life, one she might have held dear. Somebody must have known her, cared for her. That connection could very well unravel the fabric of Maplewood, exposing shadows that loomed unseen. In this initial stage of investigation, energy filled the air. A fight against time had begun. Monroe sensed the tension thrumming through the town. Each person would soon be asked to reflect on their relationship with Maggie, seeking pieces of a puzzle that had begun to take shape, yet was still swathed in uncertainty. The delicate threads of intrigue promised to lead her deeper into the heart of Maplewood's hidden complexities. The dead ends. Days turned into a blur, and the investigation became a consuming whirlwind that demanded every ounce of Monroe's energy. With the arrival of the forensic analysis, they learned that the red scarf belonged to a young woman named Lily Carter, a transient who had briefly moved to Maplewood a few months ago. After interviews with Lily revealed nothing incriminating, and her alibi checked out efficiently, Monroe felt the bitter taste of disappointment settle in his stomach. Hopes had risen with each new lead, only to come crashing down. Monroe sat in the dimly lit conference room with a whiteboard plastered with potential suspects and witness statements. The more she scrutinized the board, the more she could feel the tendrils of frustration creeping up her spine, tightening around her like the very fog that had blanketed Maplewood that morning. Every name scribbled in marker represented another dead end, and the seemingly bulletproof walls of the investigation began to feel incredibly fragile. Her mind drifted back to the bookstore. She recalled Maggie's warmth, bustling life within the cozy nook, the patrons she had known by first name, the gently spoken words of encouragement to young writers. And yet, the deeper community ties may have also masked darker emotion. What had the investigators missed? The rattle of the conference room doorknob shattered her reverie. Officer Chen entered, a hint of excitement in his demeanor. We had a chance to speak with some other shopkeepers around town. A few mentioned Maggie's interactions with a local author, Jacob Williams. He's well known but tends to keep to himself. Monroe's heart raced at the mention of Jacob. Can we find him? He hasn't been seen around since the incident, which isn't entirely unusual for him. But we'll check his apartment and reach out to a couple of his close friends, Chen replied, with renewed determination. She realized that they had stumbled upon a potential connection, a shadowy intertwining of lives leading back to the heart of Maggie's existence. Yet doubts lingered. Would Jacob be the missing link they desperately needed, or was he just another fleeting specter in this twisted narrative? As Monroe stood, she could feel the pressure of time weighing heavily on his shoulders. With each dead end encountered, she was descending deeper into the intricate web of relationships that pulsed just beneath the surface of Maple. In this town, where familiarity often blinded the mundane to the sinister, she was certain that understanding Maggie's connections was the key to unlocking the truth. But with every turn, Time's relentless march pressed one each moment, spooling further into uncertainty. A break in the case. Days turned into a week, and the investigation seemed to be entwined in a labyrinth of frustration, where hope flickered like a waning candle. Detective Monroe was still chasing Jacob Williams, now reaching out to friends whenever she could, each conversation overshadowed by the echo of Maggie's absence. But it was during one late evening, long after the office had emptied, that the tide began to shift. Monroe sat alone in her office, the soft hum of the overhead lights creating an almost meditated atmosphere. She was going through the latest batch of witness statements again, combing through the details that had somehow eluded her in earlier drafts. As she flipped through the papers, a familiar name caught her eye. Tom Reynolds, a local handyman who had worked sporadically for both Maggie and some of her neighbors. The scrawled details of Tom's statement began to take form in her mind. He had mentioned running into Maggie at a neighbor's yard sale shortly before her death. While his account had seemed benign at the time, the recollection of his casual mention sparked a sense of urgency in her gut. What had Tom seen or heard during his encounters with Maggie that might transcend mundane conversation? Monroe picked up the phone and dialed the number listed for Tom. After several rings, a weary voice answered, revealing a hint of reluctance. Yeah, Tom Reynolds. Tom, this is Detective Sarah Monroe. I wanted to follow up on your statement regarding Maggie Foster. Do you have a moment to talk? Sure, but I can't say much, he replied, the weariness evident in his tone. Monroe sensed his unease. I understand, but it's important we get every detail. Anything you observed around her lately could be helpful, she pressed gently. After an uncomfortable pause, Tom spoke, his voice dropping. I saw her with someone a few nights before, arguing. Monroe felt her pulse quicken. An argument? Who was it? A guy I've seen around town but don't know by name. It looked serious. She seemed scared. The words hung in the air, electrifying the silence between them. Did they leave together? I think they did, he stammered. Towards the park. Monroe jotted down the details, her heart racing. This was the break she needed, a potential glimpse into Maggie's last hours. Tom, can you think of anything else? Any details about this man? Just that he had dark hair and a leather jacket, but like I said, I don't know him. Each word felt like a crack in the case, revealing the light that could lead her toward the truth. Monroe closed the conversation, promising Tom that she wouldn't reveal his identity without his consent. She needed to act fast to track down the man Tom had described, someone who might hold the key to unraveling the horrific mystery of Maggie's untimely death. This was more than just hope. It was a rising tide of urgency that propelled her forward into the unknown, carrying with it the weight of both loss and determination. Each second counted. And now Monroe couldn't shake the sense that they were inching closer to unmasking the shadows that loomed over Maplewood. The suspect. With renewed determination, Detective Monroe gathered her notes and prepared to dive deeper into the mystery surrounding Maggie's last day. Tom Reynolds' description of the man with dark hair and a leather jacket etched into her mind like a brand. The park loomed large in her thoughts, an unassuming backdrop against which secrets could unfold. Hours later, she found herself standing at the entrance of a local bar, the Rusty Nail, a popular spot among town locals for after-work relaxation. The dimly lit interior was awash with laughter and conversations, but Monroe's instincts honed in on the smoky haze of trouble. As she scanned the room, her gaze landed on a dark-haired man perched at the far end of the bar, nursing a drink that glimmered with the light of nearby candles. His leather jacket hung heavily over his frame, hinting at a rugged persona honed by time and tumult. Monroe approached, keeping her demeanor professional yet focused. "Excuse me, sir? I'd like to ask you a few questions." The man turned slowly, his steely blue eyes drawing her in. "What's this about?" His voice was low, yet wary. "I'm Detective Sarah Monroe with the Maplewood Police Department." "I'm investigating the death of Maggie Foster," she replied, watching closely for any flicker of recognition. At the mention of Maggie's name, a shadow passed over his features, quickly replaced by a mask of indifference. "I didn't know her well. Just a customer at the bookstore sometimes." Monroe took the seat next to him, studying his body language carefully. "Tom Reynolds mentioned seeing you with her a few nights before her death. Do you care to explain?" His posture shifted. Monroe noted how his fingers tightened around the drink. "I saw her. We had an argument, but it wasn't anything serious." "Care to elaborate on the argument? What were you fighting about?" "I don't know her life, all right. Just someone who got in my way," he snapped, defensiveness radiating from him. The bar's ambience faded into a distant hum as the tension intensified. "Your name?" she pressed, refusing to let him deflect. "Ethan. Ethan Frost." Bedouin rolled off his tongue. Every thread of her instinct screamed for caution. She pulled out her notebook, pen poised over the page. "Ethan, do you have an alibi for the night Maggie was killed?" "I don't need to explain myself to you," he shot back. But there was a hint of unsteadiness in his voice that discouraged his bravado. Unfazed, Monroe leaned in closer. "I can't ignore that you were here that night. Several witnesses have placed you in the vicinity of the park. We know that Maggie was seen arguing with someone, a man in a leather jacket. This isn't just a coincidence." He looked away, an anxious flicker in his eyes that gave him away. Monroe's mind raced. She had found the man who stirred the depths of the investigation, but he wasn't ready to come clean. "Ethan, if you know something, it's better to speak now. We need answers." A tense silence enveloped them, the man's walls crumbling ever so slightly. He looked back at Monroe, resignation washing over his features. "I didn't want it to go this far, just wanted her to understand she was getting involved in things she shouldn't." "Like what?" Monroe pressed, sensing that perhaps the truth was close enough to grasp. "I can't, it's complicated," he stammered, shifting uncomfortably in his seat. As the light from the bar flickered around them, Monroe grasped the weight of his words and the storm of emotions that surrounded them both. Ethan Cross was not just a chance encounter. He was woven into the fabric of Maggie's life, and in the deeper Monroe dug, the more complicated things became. Time was slipping through her fingers, and she knew she needed to follow this lead wherever it may lead, even if it meant confronting secrets that could turn Maplewood upside down. The trial. The atmosphere inside the Maplewood courthouse was thick with tension as the trial of Ethan Cross began, a stark contrast to the tranquil beauty of the town outside. The courtroom buzzed with anticipation and uncertainty as townsfolk filled the benches, waiting to see justice unfold for Maggie Foster. Detective Sarah Monroe sat among the crowd, her heart pounding as she prepared to witness the culmination of weeks of relentless investigation. Ethan, dressed in a crisp suit as part of a carefully orchestrated defense, appeared unshaken, though a flicker of apprehension lingered in his eye. The prosecuting attorney, a seasoned litigator known for his no-nonsense approach, stepped up to deliver the opening statement. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, today we will present evidence that proves beyond a reasonable doubt that Ethan Cross is responsible for the death of Maggie Foster. We all know, as a beloved member of this community, this case is less about physical evidence and more about the emotions that lie beneath the surface of what appears to be a simple disagreement. As the attorney laid out the timeline, Monroe listened intently, recalling the tension in Ethan's voice during their conversation at the Rusty Nail. The prosecution presented witness testimonies that echoed through the courtroom, like echoes of heartbreak, a neighbor who heard raised voices, the police report detailing Maggie's remains, and finally a forensic analyst who confirmed that Ethan's DNA had been found on the scarf he left behind. Ethan's defense attorney was equally sharp, cross-examining each witness with precision, sowing seeds of doubt in their narratives. Is it possible that you misconstrued what you saw? Could it have been a simple disagreement between acquaintances and not a prelude to murder? As the questioning continued, Monroe felt a shiver run down her spine when she caught Ethan's eye. He appeared calm, but there was an intensity within. He was playing a character, shifting between victim and aggressor. The courtroom buzzed with conflicting emotions. After each piece of compelling evidence presented, the defense offered counter-arguments that questioned not just Ethan's guilt, but the integrity of the investigation itself. Then, it was Ethan's turn to take the stand. He spoke with an air of sorrow and regret, painting himself as an innocent man swept up in circumstances beyond his control. I never meant for it to go this far, he told the jury. Maggie was just trying to help me, but I was struggling with things I didn't want to admit. Monroe watched as the flickering light of empathy began to cast shadows on the jury's faces. His story wrestled with their sentiments. Could they see him for what he might appear to be? A troubled soul rather than a killer. After several days of intense testimony and emotional outbursts, the courtroom fell silent as the jury deliberated. The weight of the moment lingered palpably in the air. Everyone's breath held as time stretched on. In that silence, memories of Maggie's laughter and her unwavering spirit filled Monroe's mind. Finally, the jury returned, their faces composed yet unreadable. The foreman stood up, his voice steady. We find the defendant, Ethan Cross, guilty of second-degree murder. A collective gasp erupted throughout the courtroom, a mixture of relief and sorrow sweeping over the audience. Monroe felt tears prick her eyes as the reality set in. Justice had been served for Maggie, yet it was enveloped in the weight of law. As the gavel struck, sealing Ethan's fate, Monroe realized that the true unraveling of this case would ripple through the community long beyond the verdict. In Maplewood, the echoes of the past would forever alter their shared narrative, a community woven tightly yet now marred by a shadow that would loom over their lives, serving as both a reminder and a call to seek deeper truths in the relationship they cherished. The aftermath. The autumn leaves outside swirled restlessly in the crisp wind as the community of Maplewood grappled with the ripple effects of the trial. With Ethan Cross now incarcerated for the murder of Maggie Foster, the town was left in a disquieting state of reflection. People gathered in small groups at local cafes, their hushed conversations tinged with disbelief and sorrow. The tragedy had transformed their little haven into a tableau of fractured innocence. Detective Sarah Monroe had immersed herself in her work, a comforting routine amidst the chaos of emotions that swirled within her. The sergeant's desk was piled high with cases waiting to be addressed, yet no file felt quite as heavy as the one bearing Maggie's name. Each paper reminded her of the laughter gone too soon, of the vibrant life that had thickened the air with warmth, now reduced to memories and whispers. In the days following the trial, Monroe found herself drawn to the cozy nook. The quaint bookstore remained untouched, though a lingering sadness filled the air. As she pushed open the glass door, the familiar chime greeted her, but the heart of the store felt muted. Sunlight streamed through the windows, casting a golden glow over the books, illuminating the titles that once danced under Maggie's touch. She could almost hear her laughter echo through the shelves. "Detective, can I help you?" came a tentative voice from the back of the store. It was Jill, the young woman working part-time during Maggie's absence. "Just checking in, Jill," Monroe replied, forcing a smile. "How are you holding up?" "It's hard," Jill admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Maggie loved this place. Many spirit is still here, Jill. Maybe we need to find a way to continue her legacy. Host book readings, invite the community to share their stories." A flicker of hope ignited in Jill's eyes. "You really think we could?" "I want to honor her memory," Monroe nodded, feeling embers of determination glow within her own heart. "Absolutely. He brought this community together. He can do that for her. We can do that for her." I know how weeks that followed. Plans materialized. They organized a memorial event at the town hall, inviting community members to share their favorite memories of Maggie. The event filled the room with laughter and tears as patrons took turns, recounting anecdotes of the joy she spread, the books she recommended, and the dreams she ignited. With each heartfelt story, the air gradually shifted, drifting away from deep sorrow and towards a celebration of life. Real. Monroe stood in the back of the room, feeling the warmth radiate as the community honored their beloved bookstore. It was in these moments of shared grief and joy as she began to realize the underlying strength of Maplewood, a tight-knit community that had endured shadows and emerged united. As the evening drew to a close, an elderly woman approached Monroe, her eyes shining with gratitude. "Thank you for helping us remember her," she said. "We needed this." "It was Maggie who brought us together," Monroe replied, unable to shake the warmth that filled her heart. "Just needed to honor that connection." Walking back through the quiet streets of Maplewood, beneath the canopy of twinkling stars, Monroe understood that while tragedy could fracture, it also had the power to heal. The bonds of the community would carry them forward, wrapped in resilience and love, a living testament to the legacy of one remarkable woman who had touched so many lives. Although the shadow of death had loomed large, the light of life persisted, and it was that very light she vowed to protect, for both Maggie and Maplewood. Reflection. The sun sank low on the horizon, casting a warm golden hue over Maplewood. Detective Sarah Monroe strolled through the streets, her heart moving heavy yet light at once. It had been weeks since the trial concluded, and while the community began to stitch itself back together, remnants of the past remained etched in the hearts of its inhabitants. As she made her way past the cozy nook, she caught sight of Jill arranging a shelf by the window. The bookstore buzzed with activity. Locals came in and out, exchanging stories, The air permeated with the scent of freshly brewed coffee. A sign hanging above the cash register read, "In memory of Maggie Foster. A place for connection." It was a simple tribute, yet it encapsulated the essence of what she had fought for: community, warmth, a shared spirit. Monroe paused, contemplating what the case had taught her. It illustrated the fragility of life, the thin veneer of safety masking deeper troubles, and the echoes of unresolved pain that could linger long after a tragic event. But beyond that, it revealed the resilience in people's hearts, the unwavering pursuit for connection, and the determination to honor those they lost by forging deeper ties.